While it is not exactly a Super Tuesday, it is another point where we are able to mark a turning time in both presidential nominating processes, where the presumed Republican choice would seem to be suddenly not so automatic, and the socialist usurper from the Northeast may be good for sound bites, but not so good on actual challenge to the queen of all Democrats. Where we are, right back here to seeking out the best of the worst instead of just the best, where the polls are changing to the point of mocking even themselves, and a front-running candidate is finally getting some scrutiny people believe he has earned. I'm Ed Berliner. Welcome to this special edition of The Hardline as we begin our night of wall-to-wall and poll-to-poll coverage of the next set of telltale numbers, affirmations, and second-guessing. Buckle up. The ride does not get any smoother out from here on. Welcome back the man who reads such tea leaves with consistent ease, former Deputy Assistant to Vice President Dick Cheney, CEO of Christie Strategies, Ron Christie, joined by the political editor at LifeZette.com, where the motto is simple: life explained, which has to be the toughest thing for anybody to do at this stage of the game, Keith Koffler. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Keith, I'm going to go ahead and begin with you. The nightmare scenario as we get into the primaries tonight, as we get down to the voting, as we wait for the polls to start closing. There are some people, a number of publications, as a matter of fact, saying the choice between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz for the Republicans is a complete nightmare scenario. You agree?
Well, it depends whose nightmare you're talking about. I think if you're talking about the Washington establishment, yes, that is a tremendous nightmare. This is nothing like they expected. Cruz and Trump together are getting, I think in the last primaries, the minimum they got together was about 2/3 of the vote, up to 80% of the vote in one of the primaries. It's a complete disaster for the establishment. They really, they started out thinking, well, are we going to support Jeb? Are we going to support Rubio? First it was Jeb. And now it's really left to nobody at this point. Cruz and Trump are polling way ahead of them. Really, the establishment now has only to look at the convention and some kind of scenario there where they can finally pull this out. So for the establishment, yes, this is their nightmare. For the base of the Republican Party and for the voters who are supporting Cruz and Trump, this is not a nightmare.
All right, Ron, good to see you again. Let's get right to work here. What happens if Donald Trump does indeed fall short? Let's be honest here. We're seeing all kinds of poll numbers here. There might not be very reliable in a lot of the polls that we've seen for these states that are up for grabs tonight. So if he falls short to Ted Cruz for the second time in 4 days, does it tell us that he's starting to peak and fail?
Well, I think, good evening, he may have failed. He may have peaked indeed, Ed. What I'm looking at is this. I'm looking at a scenario that if Donald Trump wins in Florida and John Kasich wins in Ohio, then Trump will need 59% of the remaining contest in order to pull this out. If Kasich wins in Ohio and Rubio wins in Florida, then Trump's going to need 69% of the remaining contest to prevail. Thus far, he's only gotten 44% of the Republican ballots cast. So I don't see how Donald Trump, if he's not getting 69 or 59%, he's only getting 44 of the contest we've had thus far. I think we could be in this for a while, Ed.
Ron, the Monmouth University poll that is out today. If Trump emerges as the GOP nominee, 7 in 10 Michigan Republican primary voters say they would get behind him in a general election, but 9% say they would vote for Hillary Clinton. Is this the beginning of the real insurrection some people have been hoping for?
Well, I think it's a disaster. 2 points here. Number one, remember that millions of people have cast their ballots for Trump and for Cruz. And I think that speaks to what Keith was saying. It's a nightmare scenario for the Washington establishment, but I think people who live in the real world around the United States are saying, we need to send a message. We need to shake it up with those guys in D.C. because they're not listening to us. So it would be a nightmare scenario for the establishment, but I think that folks around the country would be just fine if you had a Cruz or a Trump as the nominee.
But Keith, how do we continue, those of us sitting here and everybody else inside and outside of Washington, how do we continue to answer the American public when they say Donald Trump is the guy we want? We don't care what he says, when he says it, how he says it, and what you guys sit there and say, because at the end of the day, we have made him winners and he is still the top delegate choice.
Yeah, it's been a remarkable thing. I mean, there seems to be nothing that he can say and nothing that analysts can say to derail him. Although I do agree, the polls have tightened up some, and there may be, it's possible that Romney's attacks have had an effect. There's a lot of money going into attacking Trump now, especially in Florida and other places. So there does seem to be a little bit of a change. He won. He just really barely won the two primaries that he won last Saturday, and he lost to. I think tonight will be very important, because if these primaries, it's an expectations game a little bit. If these primaries are closer than expected, it could say that the momentum is shifting to Cruz. And I think there's even a possibility that Cruz could win Idaho. It's a closed Republican state, a rural state, the type of primary that has benefited Cruz in the past. And interestingly, if Cruz does win Idaho, that's a winner-take-all state. If you get above 50%, Cruz could even come out. It's possible he could come out on top in terms of the delegate haul tonight, even with Trump winning in Michigan and Mississippi.
Gentlemen, let's talk about a couple of stories here. Every time we talk about Donald Trump, anybody else does, and we say anything negative or anything that is based in fact that other people are going after him on, we are called haters. Let's be very honest with that. The people who love Donald Trump, they love him regardless. Here's a couple of things that come out today. Apparently, Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, Google co-founder Larry Page, the Facebook investor Sean Parker, who's worth billions, and the CEO of Tesla Motors, Elon Musk, have met with GOP officials. What can we do to stop Donald Trump? That's number one. Number two, story comes out tonight, talks about how Donald Trump continues to say, I'm going to make America great again by putting American jobs back here. I'm going to put the United States to work. Turns out that the line of clothing for his daughter, Ivanka, which is on the Trump Organization website as part of his empire, is Chinese clothing. It is outsourced clothing. Furniture, shirts, shoes, salad bowls, even Trump body soap, and a lot of other issues here are made in China. I come to you first on this one, Ron. These are issues here. These are people who are against Donald Trump. But aren't they stating the facts that all the voters need to know if they are going to make a complete and honest decision? Or are we just sitting here just a bunch of haters who are doing anything we can to get rid of him?
Well, I don't think we're a bunch of haters. I think Donald Trump has received hundreds of millions of dollars worth of earned media of being able to call in anybody's talk show, radio show, television show, and say what he wants and then not get asked the serious questions. I find it ironic that the Huffington Post, of all places, was the outlet that broke the story today of this confab of the American Enterprise Institute having a gathering in Sea Island. But the second point, I think, is far more interesting. Donald Trump, let's make America great again. We're going to keep American jobs. We're going to build a wall. But oops, my family is outsourcing these jobs to China. So the hypocrisy that people have been yelling at him and labeling him with on the presidential debate stage now, Ed, I think now the mainstream media is going to start to pick up on some of this.
Keith, here's another one here. The Better Business Bureau. Donald Trump came out and talked about Trump University, talked about it being an A-rated university. Well, the Better Business Bureau comes out today, and they're firing on all cylinders here. They're saying, wait a minute, you haven't had a rating since September 2015. Last time you went between a D and an A, so there is no validity whatsoever in this. But then again, here we go, Keith. These are people saying that you did not tell the entire... Matter of fact, I got one more just sitting here, and again, we're going to get hammered. Let's go for it here. Here's Donald Trump saying that he employs many people at a Honolulu hotel. He wants the people there to vote for him in the caucus. It says, well, don't worry, I employ many people at the hotel. The hotel fires back with a statement that says, you don't own this hotel. Mm-hmm. You're not involved in any way of selling or developing this property. You are making an improper statement. Come on, Keith, this has got to stop somewhere. Either we stop reporting the news or people basically tell us we don't care. Where are we here?
Well, I myself had a shocking experience about a month ago. I actually have a Donald Trump tie, and I turned it over, and yes, it is made in China. So I have experienced this thing firsthand. But look, yes, I think that, with these ads, a lot more of this stuff, Trump University had not been a big issue until very recently. There are a lot of other things like this that haven't been pointed out. It could hurt him. But remember, Trump, I really think, represents some serious issues to people. He is the one speaking about immigration. He's the one speaking about trade deals that have affected average people in adverse ways. So it's not just image. There are real things that he's talking about. So it remains to be seen if these negative things that you're bringing up, which are real issues, will actually dent his popularity.
And I don't want to just go against Donald Trump because there's other news out here as well, though, to be fair, he is the top choice. And when you're the top dog, you get picked on better than anybody else here and bigger than anybody else. There have been rumors of Marco Rubio being advised to drop out of the race. This surfaced on CNN. They started it. The Rubio campaign is furious at what has gone on about this because he says the pressure is the exact opposite. Here's what Marco Rubio said.
This is unlike any election ever. It is not going to follow a traditional model. Think about it this way. If anyone else other than Donald Trump was the front runner, every candidate in this race would have a tremendous amount of pressure on them to drop out. Instead, the pressure is to stay in.
Wait a minute here. Keith, let's take this from a journalistic side of things. First of all, CNN is the one that reported this. They were talking about advisors on the campaign that he was going to drop out. CNN did not contact the campaign for comment, and there's a story out saying it only came from one source. Keith, this is pretty shoddy, isn't it?
It is. That's the journalistic environment we live in a lot these days, isn't it? One source, don't contact the campaign. People so eager to have a story that they just put it out there without checking like that. But, on the other hand, really, Marco is just living in some kind of delusional fantasy land. I mean, he is, even if he wins Florida, well, that's just basically like everybody hating you, but proving that your mother loves you. I mean, it just really doesn't mean very much if he wins that. I've seen him in single digits in some polls in Michigan and Ohio. He really is operating in some kind of fantasy land, and he really does, I think, need to get out at this point.
30 seconds to you then, Keith. Final shot here. What do you expect to see this evening?
This evening, I expect to see Trump win in Michigan and Mississippi. I think it will be tighter. As has previously been the case last Saturday, it'll be tighter than the polls show. Idaho, I'm not sure. I think it's possible there will be a Cruz victory there. By how much remains to be seen. But that's 50-50.
Mr. Christie, you get the final word on tonight.
I think Keith's right. I think it's going to be closer than expected. Michigan, Governor Kasich's been surging of late. I see Cruz pulling it out in Idaho as well, and he should have a good shot of winning down in Mississippi as well. The story of the night's going to be, why is Marco Rubio still running tomorrow?
Do you think the other story that we get by the time we hit tomorrow morning, it's going to be how many members of the GOP establishment are saying novenas and special prayers?
Yes, or hasta luego.
Or hasta luego, exactly. I think they're going to ask him the same question about John Kasich, but let's be honest. Kasich, Rubio, they're going to stay until they get to their home states, because they need to try and prove something, if indeed they have the money. Keith Koffler, Ron Christie, gentlemen, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll do it again soon. Now, let's keep you up to date here. We're going to be on the air until midnight this evening, watching as the polls close, watching as the numbers come in, watching as we start to see what is happening around the country. A big Tuesday night for all the candidates. And we'll see if those numbers do indeed start to squeeze down. Now, as Michigan prepares to sound off on their presidential choices, one city and one religion is getting plenty of attention this election cycle. We're going to talk to a woman who still has a question and an invitation for Donald Trump when we continue on this special edition of The Hardline, America Votes 2016.